This time on Between the Wheels.
We're losing all the young people that are buying muscle cars. They're not even coming into our showrooms. So they put this car together to draw a crowd. With American Motors engineers being as far forward as they were thinking in the way the car was designed, it kind of turned into the car I wanted to acquire.
Bought it new in 1970.
Those were the best days of our lives, I think.
17 years old when I bought that car.
Ran on the street. I went there, made noise, and went home.
Yeah, that's what it feels like in a 9-second car.
I got it up on jack stands and I cried.
Most people would look at it and say, it's a basket case, you can't fix that.
I mean, we didn't have any safety checks and none of this bullshit now. I mean, everybody just drove a car, you know.
At 40 miles an hour, if you're gonna crash in this thing, you're friggin' dead.
I spent probably 16-hour days. I would end up sleeping in the body shop in a car.
It's going to be a lot of work, and she said, who cares? It wasn't that we had money falling out of our pockets, and we made the car happen because of the desire to restore the car.
So today on the show, we're doing something a little bit different. We've done a lot of different cars. We've done Pontiacs, done Chevys, Dodges. What we haven't done is an American Motors car. And this is a very special car and a very special person. We actually have Chris here, who is a world record holder. And it's an honor to have you on the show. I've been dying to do this car for a long time. I met you last year at the Sudbury Cares car show, and I saw this car and I said, man, I gotta do this car. Tell me about this car. What am I looking at here?
Well, it's a 1968 AMX. It's a limited production car. In 1968, they only made 6,700 of them. That's pretty well all North America. Even though Ontario had an American Motors assembly plant, this car actually was made in Ontario, but it's a pretty small number. And because of the style of the car and the potential that the car had, with the American Motors engineers being as far forward as they were thinking in the way the car was designed, it kind of turned into the car I wanted to acquire.
That's really cool. And the way it was built was already, we're kind of talking off camera. You said if half the work can be done, you might as well have half the work done. And that's kind of what this car had, because a lot of the vehicles, even though they had a lot of power, they didn't necessarily have the technology or I guess the engineering at the time with some of those vehicles to have it really efficient. You had axle hop, you had issues like that, whereas this one, you didn't have those issues. Maybe talk about why you chose this car in particularly.
Well, if you're gonna go with something that's gonna be quick, you gotta look at lightweight to start with. And then you want to look at weight transfer in the car. And the control of wheel hop is a nightmare that so many of the 60s cars had to tolerate. And they had a repair area with trailing arms that solved that problem. I looked at the car's engine setback, at the differential, at the wheelbase, and everything, it's lightweight, everything just kind of worked into the idea that I got a really good piece to start with.
Right. So this car, so some of the things were the engine setback. We're gonna look at where the engine is, we're gonna crack it open, and we're gonna talk about the engine itself, but that's gonna be in a few minutes. First, we're gonna talk about the other features, which is the actual trailing arms. And now, mind you, it still has the same suspension, normal car. You have leaf springs and whatnot. How does it differ from other cars? How do they stop the axle hop itself?
Chevrolet tried out a couple things. They tried staggering the shock mounts on the back. There were other guys who tried stuff. There were things like traction bars on the car to handle the deflection in the leaf spring when you got on it hard and the differential tried to bounce. Yeah. But American Motors decided to put a link on the top of the differential into the frame which created a secondary arc for the suspension to travel in. And because it did that, the differential couldn't move up and down because it couldn't cut two distinctly different arcs.
Okay.
And because of that, the trailing arm really worked well. And other companies didn't do it. They did Mickey Mouse fixes to try to sell cars and get away with it, you know what I mean?
Okay, so you had a lot of power already to begin with this car. This is a pretty big motor, which we'll talk about soon. But now, this thing doesn't even have traction bars, and you have no axle hops. So
no.
AMC really solved that problem in a very unique way that no one else did at the time, I guess.
That's
I can't see anybody else that had done it. So that was one thing. So next thing is you have the engine setback. Maybe talk about the engine setback.
Well, if you want to leave hard, go fast or whatever, the best thing to do is to transfer weight to the back of the car as hard and as fast as possible. By doing that, by sending the engine back, you're basically moving weight closer to the center line of the differential. The car is going to lift the front wheels a little bit as it moves anyway, which has a tendency to move weight to the back anyway. But the more you can set the engine back, as far as I'm concerned, if you had the engine beside me and I could operate the carburetor from the driver's seat, it would be the best possible scenario. However, it's not. I mean, it's not a car anymore, it's a race car.
Right.
And by having the engine set back, it allows you to weight transfer the car much more efficiently.
Okay, very cool. And at the same time, let's talk about the car shape itself, because when you're talking about fast cars back in those days, you talk about vehicle sizes, you can talk about something like the Nova or the Camaro. That was a pretty small car, but this is even smaller, more of the size of a Vega, a lot smaller of a vehicle. So AMC really went above and beyond in terms of making this fast, because cars like the Vega didn't have very quick engine. It was like a 6-cylinder or something in there, I believe.
That's true. The thing is with the AMX is they built this car with the idea of competing with the Corvette. They built the Javelin to compete with the Mustang and the Camaros and you know, the Dodge products that were like the Barracudas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they were okay. They had a backseat in them, which was a bit of a joke, but it was there, you know what I mean? But they built this car to compete with the Corvette because they thought if they had something that was a two-seat car, similar to the Corvette, and the only one in recent memory was the 55 to 57 T-Bird that was a two-seater, and that would create a market for a car like this that nobody else is touching right now. So by being a 97-inch wheelbase car, and by having the engine set back and the lightweight and no back seat and all the funky stuff that removed weight from the car, it turned into a pretty hard-hauling muscle car, or as they like to call them, a pony car. It's like that, but their whole idea was to compete for the Corvette market.
Wow, that's pretty cool, and this car is pretty quick, and I can't wait to see what this car does. But now let's talk about in terms of the styling. When you got this car, it did look a lot like this, but it wasn't like this. You had done some work to it. Maybe talk about some of the work you had to do to get in this shape, because it looks immaculate now.
When I decided that an AMX was what I was going to look for, of course, then the search started to see what I could find. At that time, I found 3 that were feasible. There was a red one in Florida, there was this one by Ottawa in Arnprior, and there was a 1970 at a dealership in Ohio that they'd had since it was new. The 1970 AMX is probably the nicest one of them. It's got a ram air hood on it, it's got some funky stuff like that, but it's still basically a 394 speed car. However, the one from Ohio was a 343 with an automatic transmission, so wrong engine, wrong transmission, wrong all kinds of other stuff. And it might not have been a go-pack car, which is trailing arms, posi-track, disc brakes, and heavy-duty suspension, that this car was. So I looked at the one in Florida. I wasn't too happy with what I saw. I looked at the one in Arnprior and I said, well, it's only a small trip, 6 hours over there to have a look at it, so we'll go have a look at that one. So we loaded a trailer on the back of the truck and we went down and had a look at it. Now when we saw it, it needed a lot to be desired. It didn't run well, it needed sheet metal work, it needed body and paint, it needed a lot of stuff. But we took a really good look at it, and my wife asked me, she said, what do you think? And I said, honey, it's kind of a piece of crap, but it's nothing we can't fix. So she said, well, okay. You know, so we loaded the car, we made a deal with the guy on the car, we cut his price a little bit because of the issues, and we brought it home. And then my idea was to do a major project every winter, because you don't drive the car in the wintertime anyway, but yet make it so it's drivable the next summer. So I did that. I would do a major through the wintertime, put it back on the road for the summertime and drive it, have some fun with it, back in the shop in the wintertime, do another major, and that's kind of how the car got built. It takes a lot longer to build it like that, but you don't miss the excitement of actually getting out and blasting the car down the road.
I have done videos with people in the past where their cars are rougher shape because they've had them for so long. Some of them have done restorations as far back as the 90s, and there are imperfections. And when asked, you know, would you take the car off the road and get it redone, they said no, because then I can't drive the vehicle. So I totally understand that there's a lot of enjoyment that comes, and every year that goes by, you know, it's 1 year less. So you gotta enjoy the car. So it's really cool what you've done here, because there are some improvements you've done here that I've never seen before, and we're gonna talk about them when we open the hood. But just when I see the car itself, obviously, the interior itself, you changed some stuff. You got some new seats in there, you got a different shifter. Maybe talk about the interior, because you did some modifications here to make it look like this. I like what you got in there right now. It looks really nice.
Well, yeah, I tracked down some aftermarket seats. You know, I bought a carpet kit from American Motors, from Jeff Kennedy's American Products, that has all kinds of AMX stuff. Then, you know, the tach failed, and the speedometer failed, and the gauges failed, and I said, yeah, you know what?
It's a full restoration at that point.
So I took and made a new dashboard for it.
Okay.
I put new all autometer gauges into it. The speedometer, the tachometer, all that stuff is all autometer.
Unbelievable.
Then I bought a set of blinkers from the same guys that supplied the wiring kit. It's a painless wiring kit, and they make little blinker lights because I couldn't incorporate them into the gauges like they were originally. So I stepped the gauges up and down and put the blinkers in there and a high beam indicator in there with the fuel indicator, and built the dashboard that has grounds for all the wiring and everything. And then if I pull the dashboard off, the padded stuff, you got complete access to the fuse box that's in there, plus all the gauges and everything. So it's easy to do repairs and modify things, or repair stuff that goes wrong. You know?
It makes sense what you did. I think at that point, you just kind of had to do it that way if you want to do it right. And at the same time, you mentioned off camera that you had to do the quarter panel, so you did some welding there, and you got everything. So the car's kind of all buttoned up as best could be, and you repainted it, but you kept pretty much the same color, more or less.
Yeah, I took it to an auto body shop here in town, so he drakes out a whole bunch of paint samples, and we looked through, and I said, I'll take this one.
Super nice.
And that's the color that we ended up with. So it's a little brighter than what was on it originally, but I like it. If you go back to the 60s when they were building these cars, they had these things called hot colors and stuff like that, which was the crazy greens and purples and reds and blacks and stuff like that. And it's the kind of a color that would be kind of representative of the era, but with a whole lot of metallic in it. And I thought, that's cool, you know?
I think it's cool to add a little accent, you know, to it and make it a little more modern in that sense.
Make it sparkle.
Yeah, it looks really cool. And it's a car that you put a lot of work into, and I think it deserves a sparkle, so it's pretty cool to see it like this. And
thank you.
I think it's gonna look awesome on the road. So, I think the next thing we gotta do, really the magic of this vehicle is under the hood and everything you've done. So I think we gotta bust open this and take a look what you got under here. So when it comes to engines and engine sizes, big blocks, small blocks, you know, Chevy had small block 350s, and then they had 396 big blocks, and then obviously you have the Hemis and Dodges. What is different about AMC? I have never done an AMC before.
Oh, they only made a small block. They made 6 cylinders and they made small blocks. And if you look at a lot of the Ramblers that run around, say, you know, this and that, you're kind of your grandfather's car, you know what I mean? It had a 6-cylinder in it, got great gas mileage, and ran forever. It was a car, it was transportation, that's really all it was, okay? It wasn't until the muscle car thing started to really build steam that American Motors even looked at something like this.
Really?
So they started in around 1965 with prototype AMXs. They built about 3 or 4 of them in a prototype mode in order to end up with this car, okay? And the whole idea was, they said, we're losing all the young people that are buying muscle cars. They're not even coming into our showrooms.
Okay.
So they put this car together to draw a crowd to the showroom. And that was the idea of this car. So they didn't really do anything big in horsepower until they started with this block that started in 290 cubic inch went to a 343 and then up to a 390, which is just bore stroke differentiation on the same block. Okay, so this car of course has a 390 in it because that was the highest horsepower motor that they made, and in original trim the car made 315 horsepower, 450 pounds-feet of torque in original trim,
Right.
which is not bad. And I said that basically is a car for everybody.
Yeah, and that's maybe not a crazy amount of horsepower. However, for the size of vehicle, if you're comparing it to something like a full-size car or like a Charger or something, that is a lot of speed because it's the weight differential.
That's right.
It's only a two-seater, right?
Yeah,
So
and it's a 3,000-pound car.
exactly, and at the same time, all the changes you made, how much horsepower would you say does it have ballpark right now?
I'd say, and this is a gut feeling from my racing background, that it probably makes 450 horsepower.
Okay.
The reason for that is I run this car on pump gasoline, and I promised my wife when we first decided to do this that I was going to build a car that only ran on pump gasoline.
Right.
Because I'm tired of hauling drums in and out of my shop full of alcohol or full of racing fuel and pumping this stuff and doing all of this stuff. I said, I will work around the gas we can buy.
Yeah.
And I said, I will modify the car so it continues to function to its peak performance on what I can buy out of the pump. Okay. So because of that, that kind of varies the possibilities. You go back to the 60s when if you were misbehaving, you went out to the Sunoco and put 260 in it right off the bat. The Sunoco 260 had an octane rating of 110.
Holy crap.
Oh, it was racing fuel in a pump
insane.
gasoline thing. Okay, so if you set the car up to run on that, it was fast.
Oh
okay?
yeah.
But you can't get that anymore.
No.
93 is the best I can get right now, and it all contains methanol, which is another issue that I have to deal with in order to make the car work and not be a detonation issue or anything like that. So you're kind of limited to what you can make in power because of the parameters I laid out, that it's only going to run on pump gasoline.
So you made it run on pump gasoline, which is really impressive considering what this vehicle can do. But now there's a couple things here that are different than a lot of other vehicles I've seen. Now there's a couple of improvements here, nothing too crazy, but a lot of people have MSD boxes for the ignition, getting rid of the points and whatnot. But a lot of people don't understand why it actually works better. We were talking, what is it that makes the MSD system worth changing over, just so you have that car turning on?
The MSD stands for multiple spark discharge, okay? And because of that, what it's telling you is that it's firing the spark plug more than once on the fire up system when the motor's full of fuel, okay? So because it fires it more than once, it can actually light more areas of concern in the cylinder. And there's a little bit of collision between those various areas, but not enough to offset the value of a multiple spark discharge. The second thing is that the coil that's on them is a high voltage thing too. So instead of firing something like maybe 20,000 volts, which is the standard deal through a set of points, you're firing 70,000 volts.
Wow.
So it's a bolt of lightning, not a little spark off a spark plug.
So you're burning all the gas basically.
That's right. And if you burn it all and throw it out on time with a big exhaust system, you've created a very powerful engine.
Okay.
Because it's all about the efficiency of burning fuel. The more fuel you can burn, the more power you make. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So the next thing is we'll talk about the engine. What did you end up doing the engine itself to get more horsepower out of it?
When you want to make power, the best place to make power is in the cylinder head. American Motors in 1970 made what they called a dogleg cylinder head. And it was a dogleg shaped intake manifold on the port that created more flow. And it made a lot more power than the original cast iron cylinder head. But Edelbrock made an aluminum dogleg manifold that the valves were bigger, they were stainless, and the spark plugs were relocated so that it was a better fire up. It's just a much better cylinder head. So I said, oh, I like these, you know what I mean? So I ordered them, and I ordered, basically it's an Edelbrock top end. I ordered the air gap intake. I ordered a new 750 Edelbrock carburetor for it.
Okay.
I ordered roller rockers for it. I ordered all of the components that put this together to make it stronger.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are with the top of the motor. And because the cylinder heads are so good, it makes decent power.
So you also went to a more radical cam.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. if you want to make power, lift and duration is the way to do it. I was kind of leaning to Howard simply because of his background. And I said, okay, give me the specs on that camshaft. And he gave me the lift and duration. I said, I like that. Now give me the lobe separation. And he said 112 degrees. I said, send it.
Yeah.
Because that lobe separation, I don't know if you understand what that means, but lobe separation is the degrees of angle between the bumps on this camshaft lobe and this camshaft lobe. If they're too close together, what you end up with is a lot of overlap, which means valves are opening and closing at the same time. So the overlap creates a negative manifold vacuum in the car because there's so many valves open at the same time, it can't keep up with them, okay?
Right.
But if you increase the degrees of lobe separation, it takes away a lot of the overlap and it allows the motor to build manifold vacuum. And I wanted to build manifold vacuum to run my power brakes, and I wanted to run my vacuum system in my panty-vac system. So I said, if it makes that kind of lift and duration, I'm okay. But the fact that it makes that much manifold vacuum, I like that because it gives me other options, okay? So I ordered that one, and it showed up with a set of flat tappet lifters, and we put it in the motor.
Another thing, copper rad. You have copper here. Most people go aluminum.
A copper rad dissipates heat better than an aluminum one. A lot of the guys will use an aluminum rad because it's available. They can get it from a speed shop. They can get it from some of these other companies that supply parts and stuff like that because it's reasonably easy to acquire. But I had a guy who could supply me with parts for this car that could supply me this rad because the rad that was in it was a 2-core and it overheated in a heartbeat. Okay. So he sent me this 3-core rad that is big enough and bad enough that I put a 180 thermostat in the car because that temperature for the motor is the most effective way to burn fuel at 180 degrees. Because anything more than that, there's a lot of guys who will get vapor lock and stuff like that. Well, the intake manifold, I don't know if you noticed, is an air gap on this. So it keeps the fuel charge a lot cooler. And at 180, it's a perfect temperature to light the thing and make it go and not give you a vapor lock issue.
Very cool.
So if you can do that, you've solved another issue.
Right. Well, that's awesome because now you can get the proper temperature. And at the same time, if you think about the actual construction of it, so when you, let's talk about inside houses, your wiring is not aluminum, it's copper. And they were actually pulling, they used to have aluminum, they pulled it out. So obviously that makes sense that it's better for dissipating temperature, heat. So for temperature, it does make a lot more sense. So that's an ingenious move and you don't really see people doing that very often.
Well,
so,
I don't know. Aluminum looks really nice.
It looks nice, yeah.
It's clean and it's neat and it's tidy. Like my paint's flaking off of this, you know what I mean? But you can tell it's a brass radiator.
And it's not going to overheat.
No.
Brass back in the day was
well, that's what everything was at the time. And the mere fact that I could get one that would fit this car meant I didn't have to build a bunch of god-awful bracketing and remount this and remount that. I just bolted in. And hook up some hoses and it was a done deal, you know. So I added the puke tank to the side. Okay, only because if it does get hot, what it does is it throws it out, but it doesn't throw it on the ground to make the wheels in a mess that you're going to slide on the car or whatever. It throws it in the tank. And then as the motor cools down, it sucks it back in and puts it back in the rad. So you don't lose anything.
Efficiency, Talk about that little tank you got in the back over there.
Okay.
What did you end up doing here? Because your firewall is one of the cleanest firewalls I've ever seen. I'm not talking about dirt, I'm talking about oil. You did it with this tank. Let us know what you did here.
Okay, well, I was running this motor and I had basically filters on both ends. I had that filter on this end. I had another filter like that on the other end. Okay, and when the motor would build a lot of oil temperature, the vapor coming off of that would come out the filter and would coat everything with oil. I hated that. I said, there's no reason for that. I said, if you take that filter out and you put a PCV valve back in the system, which is what they did in 1968, I'm having to burn that oil off, which means it's fouling my spark plugs, it's messing up my tune-up, it's messing up all kinds of stuff. And I said, if it gets bad enough, I said, it's burning blue smoke out the back of the car. And I said, I will not have that. So I said, I had to sit down and figure out a way of dealing with the pressures in the crankcase and maintaining stuff so that I'm not putting oil all over the motor as they all were in the 60s. I tried a couple of things. There are a few things available out there that I've seen guys try on television shows because they're having the same issue. This motor has a problem with that. It builds a lot of vapor pressure and it ends up all over the place. And they tried this and they tried that and they got, and it never works, okay? It just never worked. So I said, I gotta come up with something that works better than that.
And you did.
Well, yeah. So I created a catch tank on the back that plugs into where the PCV valve was. The vacuum that it's generated in that tank is created from the carburetor where it used to run into the PCV valve. And then I built a port into the top of it to control the amount of vacuum that the canister sees. If it sees too much vacuum, it pulls oil. If it pulls oil, it's going to overfill, and next thing you know, it's going to be running down the vacuum line into the carburetor, and it's starting all over again, burning oil. So we're doing the same thing.
So this thing's adjustable that you created?
Yes. The port I built in there drops inside it, underneath that filter, and it's adjusted with a couple of bolts and a slot in it. So that as the slot opens up, it creates less vacuum because it'll pull air easier than it will pull oil.
Right.
Because the vacuum is activated at the top. So what I did is I adjusted that and adjusted that until I got it to the point where no oil is going down the vacuum hose. And now I've got a vacuum gauge in the car, and the camshaft in the car has enough lobe separation that it builds real good manifold vacuum. And because of that, it allows me to run the brake boost and the vacuum arrangement in my catch tank. So by getting that adjusted, I kind of got it to the point where at 60 miles an hour going down the highway, it's making 18 inches of vacuum. And I'm breaking that vacuum to the point where I'm probably seeing only 5 or 6 inches of vacuum in the canister. It's pulling all the vapor and it's not pulling the oil.
Interesting.
So it pulls vapor, There's enough storage room in there you can run for quite a long time before it ever overflows.
Wow.
Then you shut the car off at the car show, it sits there, it cools off, the vapor changes back to oil, drops back in the crankcase, and it starts all over again.
Wow.
But it doesn't burn oil, and it doesn't cover all my stuff with oil.
So you basically made an oil separation device, I guess.
Well,
system, I guess you could say.
It's more of a panty vac system than an oil separation thing, okay? It doesn't actually separate the oil, it contains the vapor. And that's the important thing. That's what ends up all over your firewall and engine, is the vapor.
And they're usually really gunky, so that's what I was saying. So it's really clean there. The second thing I see here, which I have never seen, is you have stainless steel fuel lines. Talk about that.
Okay, we'll go back to the situation I talked about running pump gasoline. Up until last fall, Shell's 91 octane didn't have methanol in it. Ethanol, I should say. It's not methanol. Okay, methanol is a natural gas derivative. Ethanol is from corn and plants and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the ethanol stuff ends up in the gasoline because they're trying to control the amount of dinosaur stuff we're burning, okay? So they're putting 10-15% in there, whatever the case is. Now,
they don't like our cave gas.
The problem with that is all of that alcohol product, and I raced alcohol, I'm quite familiar with what it is. It's hygroscopic, okay? Hygroscopic means it absorbs moisture. So you take a tank full of that gas with ethanol in it, because the old style fuel tanks are vented to atmosphere, it will pull moisture right out of the humidity in the air.
Really?
You'll end up with a half a tank of water in there before you even know it. Wow. Just because the ethanol pulls it in. Now, you're pushing all that water through what is steel brake lines. The ethanol is running through rubber hoses that connect the steel brake lines. It turns the rubber in the system to mush, rusts the steel on the inside out because of the water in the fuel tank, and now you've got issues.
Wow.
Okay, so when I found out that Shell was being forced into putting ethanol in their high test fuel, I said, well, now we got to change the way we do things.
Yeah.
So I switched all of my fuel lines, even inside the tank, right to the carburetor over to either braided stainless or rigid stainless.
Yeah.
So I have no rusting issues anymore, and there is no rubber in the system to turn to mush from the methanol that's in the fuel anyway, causing leaks in the system and causing all kinds of issues.
Wow.
So I changed everything over to stainless, and in the wintertime, I throw some product in it which will handle the ethanol and the tendency to corrode. It's kind of like little rocks that show up in it when they start to crystallize, okay? And I've got some product that will sit in the tanks for the wintertime, and they'll burn them through in the summer on the first load of fuel. And I've been able to manage the fuel curve with the ethanol in it, and so far so good.
Wow. So, well, I guess with the way technology is going and things are changing, usually it's getting better, but in this case it's actually getting worse with what they've done. I guess having a fuel filter just isn't enough these days. If it's rusting from the inside, if it's breaking down the hoses and whatnot, what you've done here is you're kind of it's kind of like a fail-safe. You're future-proofing the vehicle so it's not degrading from the inside, which a lot of people wouldn't even think about.
Well, and that's the problem, is there's a lot of people who just don't understand this stuff, okay? So knowing that just laying there in that shop could create that kind of issue, I have to wonder what's going to happen to our car who sits here maybe 2-3 weeks in a row before I take a blast with it, or whatever the case is.
And because they're vented, that's how the water's getting in.
Okay, new cars have a different system, okay? They're vented through canisters and stuff like that. That's a different arrangement. That's why the new cars can deal with that, but not the old cars. Because it'll just spin the tires.
Holy cow, that is so aggressive for a small block. That's a muscle car. that is a muscle car.
Well, we get on a bypass, maybe I'll lean on it and kick the back barrels in, and you'll watch it fly then, but it'll probably just spin the tires. That's why I got those slicks up there.
Wow. That reminds me a lot of the 396 with the rock crusher transmission and the Nova, which is super aggressive, but this is something else. That's a big block. This is a small block, so not the same thing at all, man.
Nope.
Wow. And what transmission do you have in here?
It's a Borg Warner T10.
Okay.
That's what came with it.
Yeah. You're getting a lot of looks, eh? People are just staring at everybody we drive by.
Well, it's kind of loud and a little obnoxious and kind of cute too.
It sounds so mean for the size of car it is. It's not a full-size car like an Impala or something, but man, does it sound mean. I love it. You're burning rubber, that's crazy.
And spinning.
Holy crap.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But at least you know now.
You need the slicks if you want to drive this thing.
Well, that's why I bought them.
I've never seen somebody, burning
at that speed spin the tires, eh?
Spinning the tires on third like that, that's crazy. Wow. That's pretty cool.
Nice car, eh?
Yeah, nice car, man. I love it. Cruise is nice, though.
Not bad, eh?
Wow.
I have to be careful because in a heartbeat you're doing 80 and you're going to get a ticket. You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but it's not back like in the 60s. You grew up in the days of the street racing in the 60s. Those are totally different times.
Yeah.
Like, what were those times like versus now?
You could misbehave like that, a cop would pull you over and he wouldn't give you a ticket. He'd say, if you do that again, I'll tell your father. And that was the end of it.
That's very different than what's the case now.
Yeah.
Now they'll pull you over, somebody got a video of you, you'll get sued by somebody else.
Did you hear the story on the news today that the Ford vehicles are coming out now with the camera stuff that's filming everybody else that's misbehaving and it calls the cops automatically?
Oh God.
They're working on that right now.
Unbelievable. The times have changed.
Yeah.
Obviously, you being a racer, you know that when you really want to give it, you got to go on the track, which is the thing going.
That's where you should be.
That's where it should be, and that's kind of where we've all evolved to, and I really push for that. But it is nice that you can get up to the speed you want to get pretty freaking fast if you want to.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't push it to the floor because we won't get there as fast. We'll just be burning the tires off it.
Yeah. Super nice car though. So, speaking of burning the tires off and getting fast, you have a world record. What was the world record that you got?
Well, they tell me that we were the first Alter with a small block Chevrolet in it to make a 6-second pass in the world.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that was out there. I just wanted to go faster. So it turned out that the sanctioning body came to me and explained all that to me, and I said, well, that's pretty cool.
And how many competitors were there when you did that?
Well, it was a national event.
Wow.
There were probably 500 or 600 race cars there.
And you just got the record against all these big guys that probably have these big crews and millions of dollars. And you were just there with your wife, from what I understand.
That's right.
Unbelievable. Well,
we never brought anybody with us to turn the screws on the car because I told my wife, I said, honey, by the time I teach them how to do it, I might as well just do it myself.
Yeah.
So
ain't that the truth? Wow. You know, it's crazy that you can have a car like this with that amount of power and speed and whatnot, and you don't have to get 4-link, you don't have to get traction bars, any of that. You just have what they had. It just goes to show you how far ahead they really were with this.
A lot of people that were around at the time had mentioned the fact that American Motors have got no money, but they got some really smart engineers.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that they were oftentimes way ahead of their time, but no money to develop anything, you know what I mean? So they were able to come up with this stuff without spending a lot of money and make the car work.
It's kind of like you with the racing. I guess that's your mantra. You go in with nothing, but as long as you have that knowledge, you can turn some heads.
Well, you got to be able to stand back and go, what does that want to make it work, you know what I mean? And if you can do that and sit there and figure it out, you're going to go fast.
Yeah. All right, well, that was an awesome ride, and thank you so much for teaching me all these cool tricks and tips you did on the car. You really took something, made something amazing of it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
For being on the show. Everybody that's on the show gets a hat, a Between the Wheels hat.
Thank you very much.
So that's for you to keep.
Okay.
It's a little souvenir, and we'll see you around. We'll see you at the car shows. And
Well, I hope you find some more work for yourself out there, because there is some nice stuff in this town.
Absolutely, yeah. We're still going to be coming back here for Sudbury and doing more. A lot more cars. I think there's a lot more history to get here.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it was a pleasure doing business with you. Because,
absolutely.
This was a pretty cool deal. It's nice to meet somebody who appreciates the effort to go into these things, because so many people go, oh, well, that's just an old car.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I really want to encourage younger people even younger than me to really get into this stuff, because it's a lot of fun, and it's a piece of history. You can keep going.
The thing is that there's a lot of work to do on the car.
Yeah.
And work doesn't hurt anybody.
No.
And if you learn the skills, they tend to develop you as a much more knowledgeable person, and you'll take on anything. That's okay, because that's what it's all about.
That's good advice there, boys and girls. So we'll see you guys next time, and keep watching.
Next time on Between the Wheels.
Many people up to about 1971 died in dragsters, literally. Every weekend somebody was dying. The motor was blowing up, this was happening, cars were cut in half and stuff. And for the older guys, of that stuff, there's a rush about getting into a front-end dragster where the motor's 2 feet in front of you and the headers are beside your ears. We come from a different era. We had a lot of freedom in a lot of ways. We were a little bit more rebellious and also got away with that. I'm very serious at the line. Whatever I can do to win, that's what I'm going to do. When the race is over, let's have a drink. had a good career with them. They ran really well. I'm still doing it to this day. I'm 70 years old. And you know, sometimes different is just cool.